Welcome back, everybody, to The Creative Moment, Season 9, Episode 4. Dante Bullhauer and Jamie Bullhauer, as always. Today, you see the laptop out, you know what that means. It's interview time. We have a special guest today that we'll announce here in just a second, but first, the tradition.
I guess. Yeah.
All right, so I have not brought any guests on so far. That's my bad. But
Yeah, you did. You got our very first guest, actually.
Oh, yeah. I guess that's true.
I've been the one. All right, today we have a special guest from Canada, Konn Lavery, right? I pronounced that right? Okay, I actually own 2 of his books. He's got a ton of books and lots of interconnectedness and stuff. These are the Macrocosmo books that are a little bit more short story. The second one here, though, is kind of choose your own adventure type of thing. And I actually came across one of those. I was cleaning out my library and had my old school way back in the 80s, one of my choose your own adventure books. Though even the universe as it pertains, we'll probably maybe talk about that. He's got lots of other stories and other things. So I actually own two of his books. And welcome to the Creative Moment, Konn. And how are you today?
Good, yeah. Thanks for having me, guys. I'm doing good here in Vancouver. It's sunny. If we had talked yesterday, it would have been gloomy and cold and windy. So
that's what we got right now.
It's
a little bit.
cold. Yeah, it's cold and gloomy and rainy. So we always start with our guest. What is your definition of creativity?
Oh, yeah. It's such a big topic, and I think creativity expands further than art. I think humans are naturally creative, so I think to define it is when someone actually taps into a part of their consciousness that they aren't normally attuned to, because it seems to be a thing that can't really fit into words. It can be spontaneous, but it can also be structured, and it kind of gets sparked when you nurture that habit.
Okay. Yeah, pretty close. So in your answer, you said that when they get attuned to that part. So does that mean you think everybody can be creative?
I do. Yeah, I think we're wired that way as a species, and I think other creatures are too, especially like crows and dolphins and chimps. I think it's a part of just who we are, and we're wired to work that way, and always looking for ways to do something that's different. And I think in a lot of cases, it comes down, not all cases, but laziness is a great way to become creative, because we invent tools, we invent new ways of doing things, and that sparks creativity.
Yeah, tell us, I guess, the audience, a little bit about how your kind of creative story started. When did you first start getting into, I don't know if you started in writing or if you started in music. Tell us kind of how you started up being a creative, so to speak.
Yeah, I started since I was a little kid, and I owe a lot of it to my mom, who helped nurture that. I would always draw when I was a kid. Still draw all the time, and the drawings would kind of morph into stories where I would make some comics that weren't the best, and then I also made a lot of board games as a kid. They were grid-based battle royale styled ones, and my mom would buy me sculpting clay that I would then sculpt all these little characters that would fill up the board, and then I'd write stories to the board game. So I ended up just always making stuff since I was a small kid.
Did you know that it would become a bigger part of your life as you were kind of progressing through maybe like middle school, high school, or was it just kind of something you always thought was just kind of a hobby or just something that you would do in your free time?
I always wanted to do something creative. I just didn't want to do anything else. I just had no interest in doing other types of work. And thankfully, by trade, I'm a graphic designer and web developer, so creativity is always abundant in what I do. And I knew that had a much higher chance of paying the bills than, getting a book published and getting the movie deal and all that fun stuff.
You're looking at a graphic designer here and a writer here.
Cool.
And one of us is full time, and
That explains it.
So, when did the author adventure start for you? What the writing and publishing? Like, what was your first published story book? When did that avenue begin?
Yeah, the writing started way back with those board games, and I was making all these backstories to these characters, and I got way more interested in telling their stories than coming up with rules and stuff. And I tried to have harmony in the different types of creative outlets, where I was a big Macromedia Flash guy, so I used to make games and stuff where you could, they were kind of RPG style games, but I got, again, more interested in the actual storytelling and less interested in trying to mess with code. And then I started writing a lot more books, and I had written I wrote my first real book back in high school, and I tried submitting it to some publishers, didn't go well, so I still had this full book that I wasn't ready to give up on. And once I graduated design college, self-publishing was starting to become more of a thing, and I had the skills to really explore this, because you learn print formatting and ebook formatting and all of that. And I decided I'd try with my first book, which was Reality, Mental Damnation Reality. And it ended up being 1/3 of that original manuscript from high school, because I went back and revised it and was better at writing, brought on an editor who helped coach me in a lot of ways too. And then I just started signing books at conventions and talking to bookstores, and then eventually other publishers and stores got in touch with me, and it's been ongoing ever since.
Where would you say your creative inspiration mostly comes from? Does it come from everyday life? Does it come from maybe, I see you have a cat over there that is sunbathing. Where do you feel, or what makes you most kind of inspired to create?
I think living life, as broad as that is, but just going about your day and being a part of and living your life. So like, even simple things as when you're on the bus or at a cafe and you hear other people's conversations, or so it's there, what they're doing kind of sparks some ideas, or doing something like going on a road trip or playing music. Doing stuff helps bring in ideas. And then of course you always have other ideas like shower thoughts and all of that, but it's living life is kind of the thing that really brings it to the forefront.
So, and because we had, when we were on with Josh, we had talked about being in the coffee shop staring at people, but what, we talk a lot about saving and keeping our ideas and stuff, and like, I have Post-it notes and all this stuff. So how do you handle that if you're out and about living, or just do it and get hit with inspiration? Like, how do you handle that idea?
Yeah, that's a good question, because ideas come all the time and at different times. Like you can have an idea in that half awake, half asleep state. You can have ideas when you've had a few drinks. You can have ideas when you're just walking. And it's tough to try and figure out which ones are the ones worth keeping and then the ones that are not good at all. And I try to let the idea sit for a little bit in my head, and if I can recall it in the next day, then I think it's an idea worth exploring. But I did start something fairly new, and I don't know why it took me so long to start a dream journal, but I started it this year. Because I wanted to see if I was missing anything else with ideas, with dreams. And writing down the dream when I wake up has been a really interesting process. I haven't gotten anything worthy, but I'll flip open the notebook and see what I had written down from what I experienced in that dream, and definitely some wacky stuff. But yeah, it's allowed me to just kind of think of a different ideas that I might be able to come back to later. Right now, they're just kind of sitting in the notebook.
Okay, so you brought up, I use Stephen King a lot as an example in the podcast. And he says not to record your ideas down, only if they stay. Yep. And you mentioned like at least a day. I disagree in that. I record everything, then I go back
okay.
with that, but I've got it down. I've got it in my phone or something. But as you talked about that, even as it might stick, we had a podcast that dealing with the bad stuff, the stuff that just didn't. So, what is your process with a story that starts, but then you lose interest, or like what do you do with your rough or your bad ideas that just don't seem to come out like they should? On that,
yeah, that's a good one. Sometimes, actually, I do like to let it sit for a while. So I've taken months off of a manuscript before, where I'll just let it sit in the back and I won't look at it for a while, because then I'll come back to it with a fresh set of eyes, hopefully less personally involved with it, and then I can look and decide what needs to be cut, what needs to be saved, can any of it be salvaged. And more often than not, the ideas mutate and it does get saved, and it turns into something I would have not expected if I just because I gave it a little bit of time.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
So on that part, because I've got a couple of your books, and I know that you actually also have another, the white powdered one, like, are your stories all interconnected a little bit? Or like, these are the only two books I own. Okay, I can't buy all my books that I want, but I'll buy some more. But I'm just as you have these ideas and a short story here turns into a novel and stuff like that, is that chosen, or do you think that's part of inspiration? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, sometimes a short story can turn into a novel, but then you don't always have the luxury of doing that. And when I'm kind of drafting an idea from the get-go, it often starts with a short story in mind, and then I will see if it has enough life in it to turn into a novel. And sometimes it works out as being the first chapter, and then you can see there's a whole lot more you can add. And other times with an idea that hasn't even been written yet, I already know I want to turn it into a novel or a series. So it's figuring out how can you add other ideas that you've had that you've put aside, and it's like, hey, maybe I can just integrate these two ideas, and then they become a lot stronger together than separate ideas.
Okay, so I want to dive into a little bit about the thought process of like a create your own adventure book. I watch a couple like create your own adventure. I've read I think we're talking about the same book that you have. But I watched some create your own adventure stuff on Netflix, and it's very interesting how you weave all the stories together and the pivot points, things like that. So go into a little detail about how you go through that process and all, because it, from just the outside looking in, seems pretty complicated and like it takes quite a bit of time and thought to accomplish.
Yeah, it actually was a lot. And it actually was one of those ideas that simmered for years. And even though I knew it, I wanted it to be like a short story collection because I had so many, but I wasn't sure how you could tie in a choose your own path type thing. But I wanted it to break the fourth wall with the reader, so I always knew it was going to end the way it did. So I won't spoil it, but so that basis had lived with me for years. And then when I decided to finally write the thing, I looked at it more from a games perspective with RPGs or those old HTML kind of hyperlinked mazes that used to be online a lot more. And I had made a number of those way back in the day. There were dinosaur adventure games, so you'd like click around and play a dinosaur. So I had a basic idea of how to route pages together. And the outline for that, Beyond the Macrocosm, I ended up doing in a Adobe Illustrator, so I could see where all the short stories would connect and which ones would loop back, and which ones would end the story entirely. So that approach helped me figure out, okay, so in the interludes, in between the short stories, I need to decide how the character is going to interact and how is it going to not sound as if or I guess sort of actually sounds like in the moment, rather than when you loop back to certain areas, it would be a little repetitive. So that way it had more readability, because with short stories as a choose your own path type thing, you want people to go back and find the other short stories that are hidden in the book.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So kind of thinking like a shoots and ladders type game where there's multiple means to the same end type of thing. That kind of puts it a little bit into layman's terms, so to speak.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to summarize it. And because there's like the little hints in the right short stories, that helps readers eventually make it to the proper ending, because otherwise the story just loops over and over and over.
So, all right. So, would you do it again? Will you do it?
Yeah, I do. I do want to do another one. I'm slowly collecting short stories, like before we started the recording, Dark Canadiana, which is coming out in July. So like that, give it a few years or something, because I want that anthology to do well. But I'm collecting all these short stories that eventually I'll do another Choose Your Own Path. The tricky thing is with Choose Your Own Paths with multiple short stories, it's a very, very niche market to try and sell. So it's a lot of work for if you're trying to make some money off of the writing.
So are you that organized in your other novels? Like, how does maybe just your normal storytelling, what's your, and expand then, like, your work environment, like, do you have a space, that you always write in, stuff like that? So I guess expand on your work aspect of your writing novels. For that Beyond the Macrocosm, Choose Your Own Path, and then all of my work, I do have an ongoing Wikipedia that I keep up to date, so I can keep track of everything and search a character, search a name of a location, and that'll tell me like, oh, okay, this has been in this section or this book or short story. And for years, I've always written at the desk I'm currently at, and that's when I've got like a real focus on what I'm writing. But I'm much happier writing at a bar or a cafe, or actually the table just back there. I end up writing at quite a bit too, because sometimes you just need a break, and I like to change up my work environment, because I find you can get stuck and end up doing a lot of repetitive things when you're trying to break into new territories with writing.
So what do you do other than kind of change your scenery when you're stuck in one of those creative ruts where you just feel like you're not getting anywhere or not creating up to like your standard? What's kind of a go-to thing? I know he walks a lot. I just kind of try to get outside, just get outside the environment that you're normally in. So what does that kind of look like for you when you're kind of in a creative rut? It's
changed and mutated over the years, and I try to just listen to my head, like, why am I hitting an invisible wall when I'm writing? And even if the words are coming out, they might be really bad. So it's like, why can't I just go somewhere with these words? And usually it's either burnout, which is a whole huge topic, but I have also had to change my writing process because of technology quite recently, and partly with this new laptop, because I had used Dragon speech for a very long time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, really, really good. But then it turns out Microsoft bought them, and then the version of Dragon I have is no longer being supported and is kind of buggy on Windows 11. So it's like, oh, shoot. And then the new Dragon is about $1,000 Canadian. It's like, what? And they're targeting municipal industries and public service, so it's like high-end stuff now. But it doesn't help that it's the best one out there. So I've been trying to use this MacBook's speech to text, but it's not as good. So now I've been trying to write in different ways. I actually have started taking walks and transcribing the audio that I'm speaking into text, and then other times I'm just typing on the keyboard. And that's been the latest iteration of breaking through that wall.
Yeah. So, changing gears a little bit, what is the best thing about being a creative?
Best thing is you get to play and keep your mind sharp and not stale. I think that's my favorite aspect of creating and being creative.
All right.
Yeah.
What is the worst part?
The worst would be having to reel it back because there are too many ideas and never enough time. You have to be selective on what you want to see become real. And so many ideas end up just fading away, and you can never get to them all. So that's disappointing, but I still think it's worth it in the end.
So how many books in total have you published up to this point?
Let's see. I have published, I think, 12, and then there are 2 novels that are the Rutherford Manor novels that are with Matrix Pressworks, and they are Edmonton, Alberta based. They make movies and stuff, and that is a project they eventually want to get to, but COVID kind of killed the thing for a little while. But so yeah, 12 on my own, and then 2 elsewhere.
Okay. So was there a moment in any one of those books that really stood out that you're kind of most proud of? Maybe it's the whole book in itself, or maybe just kind of a chapter or a period where you were most proud of in one of those books?
Yeah, the one that I'm still the most proud of is Yegman, which came out in 2018, because it acted as a pivotal point in my writing career. And before that one came out, I really kind of felt like I was just faking the writing thing, and I'm just putting this mask on and conning people into buying this terrible work. And then in 2018, I had my first short story published, and I'd signed my first novel contract, which was with the Rutherford novel. And Yegman had also pushed me from my writing perspective, because before that I'd done dark fantasy and more creature feature cults where everything was everything was kind of made up. And with Yegman, I took a completely different direction and just followed where the inspiration came from. And it was just a gritty thriller based in the real world, where I interviewed a friend who was a police officer, and he told me how they would handle certain things. And so it changed everything, that book, from my own writing perspective, and then some of the extra things that had come along during that year. So I'm still very proud of that one, and I know it alienated the previous fans because I took such a different turn, and they weren't as into it, and it wasn't even my best writing, that book, but I'm still the most proud of it.
Okay, so on that note a little bit, when you're creating and even other stuff, what is in your process, where does the audience take position for you as you create? Like, when are they thought of? How are in that regard?
Yeah, they are thought of in the later revisions. First draft, I just go crazy and see where it goes, and play with that. And then in the revisions, I make it readable so I can actually read it. And that's the second draft. And then the following drafts, I start thinking more of the reader before I bring on beta readers. And then the beta readers they give me feedback, and then I really think about what they're saying and dissecting what's their personal opinion and what's an objective opinion. And that's when the story starts really refining before an editor is brought on.
How do you deal with feedback, positive, negative? I mentioned kind of that imposter syndrome. How do you respond to it? Does it come a little more personally? Have you learned to kind of take it with a grain of salt? How does positive and negative feedback land with you most of the time?
It's a mixed bag, and overall, I think I take it pretty decent. I think the design background helps, where you just get used to tossing creative ideas around and understand that certain people aren't just going to like things, and then some people that give positive feedback say they'll say something like, "Oh, it's great, I liked it," but that doesn't really tell you anything. So, overall, I think when I have removed my personal feelings from the book and I look at it with the right frame of mind, then I'm open to all the criticism and figuring out what's best going to serve the book.
Okay.
That's where the time helps too. I think I just put the book away for a bit and just like out of my head.
All right, so we got about 4 more minutes. What advice would you give to somebody who is just starting now in any creative endeavor?
That's good. The way the world's changing so much with AI and stuff, and I think it's even more important to be authentic and follow. It's going to be counterintuitive to being commercially success. I think following your creativity and worry less about tropes and genre standards for writing. And I think the same thing applies to music. If you're wanting to be a musician, I think the same thing applies to visual art too. Create your own aesthetic, create your own style, but also know and respect where other art form or I guess the other genres have come from and utilize those. And that'll help you shine in this strange, uncertain times we're having with the white noise of the internet, with what everyone's creating and AI coming about.
Yeah, we don't have time to discuss the role of AI.
I know, that's a whole can of worms.
Oh my gosh. Last question, really quick. If you had to choose, is the best creativity talent or skill set? Working on your skill set.
I am a skill person. I truly believe skill is the one. If you keep focusing on that, you will make progress.
Okay.
Very interesting. Okay. Are there any kind of last words, anything that you want to plug, marketing-wise, book-wise, anything like that?
All my stuff can be found at konnlavery.com, which is KONNLAVERY.com. You can buy directly from me, my audiobooks, my ebooks, my print books. My latest series is the Ashbourne series, which is multi-genred and really pulls in the macrocosm, which is the universe with all my works. So, that's kind of the plug. And then, the new short story, which is in Dark Canadiana, coming out July 1st, which is Canada Day. So do check that out if you want to see other creepy horror authors from Canada. And thanks so much, guys, for having me.
We'll have the link in the YouTube, at least, for people to follow. So,
Sweet.
Yes. There we go.
Yeah. So that was Konn Lavery. Great interview with him. Again, go check out his stuff. It'll be in the descriptions for the podcast, the YouTube, all those things. With that, we will see you guys in a couple weeks.